Is there a local politician in Kansas City that if they switch parties, you would believe it? There was a time where that could happen, and I think people would buy it. I don't see today how it could ever be feasible. And I bring this up because there was a report that the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, is thinking about flipping his party affiliation from Democrat to Republican. Now, he's been an awful mayor in that city. He is a very unpopular mayor in that city. He basically acquiesced to all the left-wing things that people wanted him to do, despite running as kind of a moderate Democrat, pro-cop kind of a guy. And then the Biden DOJ went after him, and he just got a pardon from Donald Trump. And there's a belief that he may now switch to be a Republican, John.
Well, you mentioned he's not popular in New York, and he made no friends here in Kansas either.
Well, that's
right?
true as well. What was that line? What's the brand of Kansas?
Brand? Yeah.
What's their brand?
Yuck, 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 yuck.
Yuck, 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 yuck. With all his cronies standing behind him. I'll never forget that.
Moo, moo, moo.
Yeah.
You mustard moo, moo, moo.
Yeah, that's right. Eric Adams is a musty moo, 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 per Emmanuel Cleaver. Isn't that right? Come on.
A man and a woman.
That's right. A man and a woman. And I thought about, could Quentin Lucas ever flip himself from a Republican or from a Democrat to a Republican? There was a day that he could have done it. It would have had to have been pre-2020. Because you go back to that 2019 mayor's race, and he ran as a very moderate Democrat. He got a lot of Republican support when he ran for office the first time around. Because he ran a very moderate pro-cop campaign, fiscal responsibility. And I don't know if I've ever shared this on the air, but there's somebody that I trust a lot who once told me that when the mayor was kind of mapping out his political future before he was mayor, he thought about becoming a Republican. Now, I don't know if that means that he has just changed his worldview, if he had different worldviews back then. I don't know any of that, but there were conversations that he had with prominent people in local political power about potentially being a Republican. And this was years ago. But frankly, that would have been better for his long-term political prospects. Now, if it's not who he is, then it doesn't matter, right? If that's not what he believes, then it doesn't matter. But I do know that those conversations were once had. But we're in such a world now where I can't think of anybody. I mean, Laura Kelly couldn't pull it off. No way, right? She just vetoed a bill that the legislature sent her for a third straight year that would have prevented minors from getting transgender surgeries. Minors, not adults, minors, kids. You couldn't veto that bill and then be like, I'm switching parties. You can't pull that off. Sharice Davids on the Kansas side couldn't pull that off. And then on the other side, Emmanuel Cleaver, it's comical to even think about it. He certainly couldn't pull that off. The only people I think who could pull it off are Northland City Council members. Wes Rogers, Kevin O'Neill, people like that, where they could say, listen, I didn't leave the party left me, and I'm now a right-of-center Republican. And I haven't changed my viewpoints. It's just the party keeps moving left, so I'm now going to be a moderate Republican. Those are the only two guys I could think of in Kansas City area politics who could make that switch and actually be believable in making that switch. Eric Adams, the New York mayor, he can't make that switch. He can't. I mean, his political career is done. The guy ran the Trump and whatever. He's allowed to do what he wants to do. He got his pardon. He got what he wanted. But it's not like he's going to move to be a Republican and everyone's going to be like, oh, yeah, that's great. That makes sense. No one's going to buy that. Not for a second. But it's something I was thinking about last night when I saw the story. And I'm like, there's only two guys that come to mind for me that could even have a chance at pulling it off, because now so much of this stuff is hyper-partisan, for better or for worse. Now, speaking of the Kansas side of the state line, this story in the Kansas City Star I thought was interesting this morning. Headlined, Kansas program aims to draw Chiefs and Royals. Does it fuel growth or does it pick winners and losers? And what is it about? It's about the STAR bonds. That's the sales tax and revenue bonds that obviously are getting a lot of attention because there's a few more months here where they're being offered up to the Chiefs and the Royals to come across the state line. Basically, what this does is there would be a sales tax implemented in the STAR bond district. And the additional revenues above current revenues with this sales tax would be used to pay off the bonds of a theoretical Chief Stadium or Royal Stadium. It doesn't increase taxes or it doesn't increase the tax rate, but the idea is that any additional revenues, the taxes off of that, the sales taxes off of that, would be used to pay off the bonds. The reason this is in the news this week is because if the Kansas legislature does nothing, the STAR bond program as a whole will sunset in July of 2026. Now, I think it should go away. All it is the government picking winners and losers. You can talk all about, well, where would the legends be without STAR bonds? I don't know. Maybe you create a desirable tax climate that attracts business, and you don't have to do things like pick winners and losers at the government level when it comes to pleasing Chamber of Commerce folks. There's a novel concept.
Talk about a bombshell.
And we also have plenty of examples where STAR bonds have failed. Prairie Fire, down on 135th, defaulted on, I think it was $65 million in STAR bonds. So you've seen this work in some cases, and I use air quotes when I say work, but you've also seen it fail, and fail colossally right here in our backyard. So this is now front of conversation because, well, you've got the Chiefs and the Royals who have this offer that extends through this summer, and then the entire STAR bond program will sunset in July of 2026. Now, you've got people in the legislature who are interested in running for governor. They want to replace Laura Kelly next year. Of course, there will be a hotly contested, especially Republican primary for all this. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't endorse some primaries. I'm not interested in doing that. I'm just talking about me personally. I would have a very difficult time getting behind somebody who is like rah-rah STAR bonds. Because these STAR bond districts also can be drawn to meet the needs of the project itself. You can draw, theoretically, and I asked this of state lawmakers, you could make the entire state of Kansas one big STAR bond district to help pay off the bonds for a Chiefs or Royal Stadium. You can just make it up, and you can make the case that, well, some little small business in Dodge City, they benefit from having the Chiefs or the Royals out at the Legends, so we're going to make the entire state of Kansas a STAR bond district. There's nothing conservative about any of this. If you create a tax climate that is desirable to business, and that doesn't mean doing what they did during the Brownback years, but if you create a favorable tax environment for individuals and businesses, you have desirable schools, you have high-quality neighborhoods, places people want to live, you will attract a lot of business. You will. I get we don't have the beaches of Florida. We don't have the oil and gas industry of Texas. We may not have the mountains of Tennessee, but we have a great state to live in. If you believe that we have a great state to live in, then you don't have to play the game of picking winners and losers. You don't have to do it. And you certainly don't have to pit Kansas taxpayers against Missouri taxpayers. One of the biggest and most flawed arguments I hear out of Topeka on this issue with the Chiefs and the Royals is, we're just doing our part for the region. We just want to make sure the teams stay here. Well, fellas and ladies, the teams haven't talked about leaving. You have never heard once a threat from either team about leaving Kansas City. So spare me the holier than thou. We're just here to help the region and make sure the teams stay here. There has not even been the slightest threat to leave. So spare me the whole, notion of, we're just doing our part and trying to help the region. No, you're not. No, you're not. trying to make yourself look good politically on the backs of the taxpayer by picking winners and losers. And I'm not going to fall for it, and I don't think most Kansans are going to fall for it. It doesn't mean they won't try. It doesn't mean the taste of more political power is not appealing enough to some people to continue on with it, but we're going to call it what it is, all right? And small business would never get the benefit of the doubt in this case. So why should they on a job like this? 913-408-7957. It's 845 on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. I do think they'll eventually extend the program after July of 2026, but I'm not here for it. Adam in Leawood, before we hit the break, what's up, my man?
Hey, Pete. So I'm an accountant here in Kansas City, so I like to read into these sort of things when it comes to how our money's being spent and whether or not these programs are successful. I'm sure you're familiar, but back in 2020, the Kansas Policy Institute did a study on this and found that a number of the projects, even if they get paid off, fail to meet metrics that are set by the program itself, whether it comes to improving quality of life, which is difficult to quantify as is.
Yeah.
And then there was another audit more recently that basically concluded the same thing.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So I just think it's not an effective way to incentivize this. Now, that being said, I do think that the Chiefs and or Royal Stadium would probably bring in more revenue and interest than, say, Prairie Fire. But in the end, I don't think it's a program that needs to be extended.
So, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, will it bring, of course, business to the Legends area? Of course. But if it's just money shifting, right? And that's what we're really talking about. It's money shifting around and just moving from one side to the other. What's it really ultimately worth? And what is the value to the taxpayer on the back end?
Yeah, the question becomes, where does the bottom line shake out? Is it really a net benefit for the area? I don't know. It's hard to know until it's too late. So,
and the whole idea of the Star Bond is you create this district, and the sales tax revenues above where they are at right now go back to pay off the bonds. If you're talking about a $2 billion stadium, that has never been tried with a Star Bond at that kind of a number. And when you've only got 8 to 10 football games and maybe a few concerts, I don't know if you can raise the kind of revenues to pay off the bonds.
Yeah, I tend to be the opinion that I don't really like the way they're handling new stadium builds across the country. Really what it is creating an entertainment district where the wealthy owners can build condos and stuff in the near vicinity. And so why not funnel some of that revenue back into the team and the paying off of their stadiums that they fund themselves instead of putting the onus on the taxpayer? But that's just my 2 cents.
Well, yeah. I mean, the reality, you're right about that. In a perfect world, this wouldn't even be up for debate and conversation, but it's happening all over the country, as you well know. I mean, these things, unfortunately, in part get funded by the taxpayer. The question is how much. And at least with the Jackson County deal, hey, 3/8 of a cent is going to the stadiums. That's fine. I just don't like the song and dance on the Kansas side as if they're like, yeah, this is nothing for you. This is the greatest deal ever. If it was the greatest idea ever, why doesn't every single state have its own Star Bond idea and Star Bond plan? They don't for a reason.
Yep. If it was the perfect program, everyone would be waving a flag saying, look what Kansas is doing.
Oh, I know. And I've not heard one state be like, man, look at Kansas with these Star Bonds. They're geniuses.
Yep.
Thank you, Adam.
Anyway.
Appreciate the insight, man. Have a great day. 913-408-7957. This will be a big topic in Topeka, and it will have political implications as well with the governor's race right around the corner. Last thing I'll add here on this with the Chiefs and Royals and the stadium projects, there was a big story in the Kansas City Star this morning about the Star Bond legislation, which is set to sunset in July of 26. Just so you have the backstory on how this works, and the Star notes this correctly in its piece, that state law authorizes the Kansas Secretary of Commerce, which is currently Democrat Lieutenant Governor David Toland, to negotiate a Star Bond agreement for a stadium. Any deal would have to be approved by the Legislative Coordinating Council, which has a 6-2 Republican majority. So Republicans, if they were to go ahead with some type of stadium project on the Kansas side, would be basically the drivers behind it that would allow something like this to happen. And also, so we're on the same page here, right? Where the debt would be repaid over 30 years, combination of tax revenue from the stadiums and surrounding development. But also, as a part of the bill that is currently out there, a portion of lottery revenues above $71 million each year would be redirected into a fund to help pay off the bonds. That is admitting that the Star Bond District itself will not pay off the bonds. If you're already saying you are redirecting money from the lottery to help pay off the bonds, you're admitting that the additional sales tax revenue from the stadium would not pay off itself. It's an admission that the project as it currently stands is not sustainable under the current and likely Star Bond proposal. So just let's all make sure we're on the same page here with this. They're admitting that it won't basically work as it's supposed to work, which is you draw a district and you use the additional sales tax revenues to pay off the bonds. But we also need money from the lottery because you're admitting it's not going to work as it's intended to work. Great job, everybody. Well done.
You mustard moo.
Thank you. Thank you, Emmanuel Cleaver. That's to everybody on the Kansas side of the state line. You must moo, moo, moo. Make all the animal farm noises you can, courtesy of Emmanuel Cleaver on KCMO. I know you want to make a noise in there, Mark. I know you got some animal noises going on at your house right now. Just
woof,
saying.
Woof, woof,
woof, woof, woof, woof. Now, is that you to the kids or you in the bedroom?
No, that's what? That's the baby. She's learning to do the dog sounds.
Okay. All right. Sure it is, Mark. Sure it is. Oh, my goodness gracious. On KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We're always streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app.